actually we have our work with in election, so we're engaged in election work. What we do is how do we improve citizens' engagement in the electoral process, and we discovered that one of the areas we have a gap is citizens' engagement in the electoral process of the election. And people think that once the vote is cast and they announce result, that's the end. That's not the end. The end is when, in some cases, when the Supreme Court gives their final judgment, or in some cases, appeal court, depends on the level of the election. So when the appeal court or Supreme Court gives the final judgment, so that means even when you appeal it and up to the Supreme Court level, that is when it is the end. So citizens should be able to follow the same way you are motivated, go and register, you go register. You then say, oh, come out and vote, you go and vote. Follow your vote, you count your vote, follow it and ensure that it's counted and it's recorded, it's registered and it's announced. The same way, follow your votes, follow the judiciary to see how is the judgment given. Because of the element of trust, so people now track and follow the judgments. However, we have seen some controversial judgments, like the Imo judgment is a controversial judgment. Like the case of the former Senate president of this country that went and contested for tickets in the ruling party, but never bought a ticket or went to contest for that in his for a senator. But the court somehow gave judgment and said that he was the candidate, and today he is in the Senate. Ahmed Lawa, mention him, right? So those judgments are controversial, and because of that, we're like, okay. And the people say there's nothing you can do. Final Habitat has given a judgment. We're like, okay, actually, it's okay. How do we get to a point where we have a citizens' court? A citizens' court, that's where we are headed. A citizens' court that will begin to ask questions. Because if you think that you are appeal court, you have given your final judgment, or your Supreme Court, citizens' courts will then ask you questions and say, we don't agree with this. And guess what, Victor? This group, the panel that we put together, they are experts. Experts. The best of the best in the country that we have pulled together. It's not just only judges that were pulled together. So we have about 4 judges, retired judges, that we have impeccable standards. That you knew that these ones did not collect bribe. Right? They vouched for from several quarters before they were brought into that panel. Right? You also have professor of political science that have seen it all in the almost at the highest level in INEC. Right? That understands the interpretation, the nuances of our election and electoral processes. So you have also senior advocate of Nigerians. You have lawyers in the panel. You have journalists. You have civil society group. So you have all of these groups pulled together. You have people also within governments that are heading government institutions, professor of law, right? In this government, and we look at these judgments. We look at it, and part of the panel, we critique it, look at it from all sides and all shades. Put side by side the Constitution. Put side by side the Electoral Act, look at everything, look at the judgment, and interpret and say what was meant, what was not meant. So that was what happened in this case. And I'm like, okay, on this issue, perfect. On this issue, perfect. However, the Supreme Court is a policy court. There are cases where the Supreme Court is supposed to take a stand. Take, for example, the issue of the Rivers suspension of the governor and the House of Assembly members. Till today, the Supreme Court is quiet about it. Why? The Supreme Court, so we said the Supreme Court should be bold and take that position and make judgment, not minding whose us is God. So we saw that issue of defection, they talked around it, but they did not deal with it. They were supposed to say, was there a defection or not? And give your judgment around that. And we fought the Supreme Court based on that. There were several other little issues that came up, but that was a clear issue. And the whole country rallied around us, with us, and agreed with us and said Supreme Court needs to do more. So the Supreme Court should be proactive. The Supreme Court should look out for erring judges. Don't only wait for only when people report them and no, but look out for erring judges. Look for controversial judgments and question them. Do not only wait until people raise complaint and all that. The judiciary is still the hope, supposed to be the hope of the common man. It's the last bus stop. If people lose faith in the judiciary, what else? People will say, then what next? Go to God. That is the only thing. Slogan for us. Nigerians are very spiritual, so we'll go to God. But we don't want to believe that our judiciary has been totally captured. We don't want to lose total faith in our judiciary. Nigeria is our country, and the judiciary has a role to play. And the judiciary should play that role. So on such issues, particularly that is required, that sends a landmark, that is a policy statement, like the River State suspension of the president and the governor and the House of Assembly, the Supreme Court should give a judgment on it. And for such things like defection, the Supreme Court should give a ruling on it, so that we know once and for all, this is the judgment, and this is because once the governor, we hear the governor will soon resume this week or next week, now 6 months would have been over, hopefully. If he resumes, then it will be an exercise in futility. The Supreme Court will say, oh, he has already resumed, and they will just shy away from it. That is what they are targeting. But there are cases you see that the Supreme Court is interested in. Once it favors some parties, the Supreme Court gets interested, and they are very fast in giving judgment in such cases. So such cases that is landmark, Supreme Court should also be very proactive and give judgments on them.
Why do you think that they seem to shy away from some cases, or when some individuals bring cases, they have speedy trials and get quote and unquote, a section they say is key, the kind of judgment they expect?
Several reasons. One is, like I said, there's a perception of capture of the judiciary. There's also the perception of he who pays the piper dictates the tone, whether you like it or not. Why would you, I'm debating a bit, how would you explain that the Inspector General, current Inspector General of Police, is retained even when his tenure is over? Why? So you think that Inspector General of Police can challenge the president? He will never. So even if the president is wrong or has given a wrong instruction, he will follow it. So the same thing with the courts. When you have buildings being set up, commissioned, projects being done, it seems like favor. It seems like favor, and they have to repay that. And unfortunately, this goes for all politicians. All politicians try to cover their part. You hear of politicians saying they are setting aside this amount of billion to pursue their cases. When election is over, what did they tell you? Go to courts. It's simple. Because they know that they can, in some ways, procure judgments. So for us, the EFCC should start tracking and pursuing such issues. How are people procuring judgment? Who is procuring judgment? It's not only when opposition is involved. Now, this is all around, all politicians, both opposition, sometimes in rigging, is who the one that rigs the other, that wins the election. So in procurement of judgment and all of that, politicians should also stay away from it. So our court system, that is the impression, that is the notion that people have, that they dance to the will and caprices of the ruling party, and while leaving out the opposition out there. But clearly, that is not the way it's supposed to be.